This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Good morning, good evening. No matter where you're listening to this powerhouse signal of Talk Radio 77 WABC, sit back, relax as we journey, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting, as you tell us, adventure with the Dr. Sky Experience. And I'm sure you'll enjoy the next 2 hours. I know I will. You can get in early on the conversation, and we recommend that you give us a call here. There's plenty of time and plenty of room for you, the listener. The contact number here, 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222, which simply stands for WABC, as you know. If you'd like to email me, it's simple. It's DRSKY, Dr. Sky, at WABCRadio.com. And to listen to our podcast archive, 2 ways to do that, and we appreciate that greatly, going to WABCRadio.com and RedAppleAudioNetworks.com. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our helmsman, Tony, navigating this powerful signal of WABC to you, the nation, the world, and I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, out to the cosmos. As you might have heard last week, we were in a pre-recorded mode. One of the weekends that we have, that is a Saturday show from midnight Saturday, Eastern Daylight Time, to 2 a.m. Sunday. One of those Saturdays will be a pre-recorded program, as I'm the actual speaker and host a dinner cruise on a beautiful lake here in Arizona, a Dr. Sky cruise to the cosmos on something called the Dolly Steamboat. And if you're ever interested in that and journeying out to the beauty of Arizona, give them a call or check them out at dollysteamboat.com. I'm sure you'll be most impressed. But ladies and gentlemen, we move into a more somber topic, and one that I think everybody out there should pay attention to. And I'm sure it affects so many people out there. But obviously from the historical side, D-Day, 81 years ago, as thousands of U.S. and Allied troops stormed the beaches of France to stop fascism. Many died, many survived, but many who survived carried the horror of war inside them. At the time, it might have been called shell shock. Now we call it by many different names, and it's very serious. PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and so much more. And for the next 2 hours, with your questions and comments, as we have a dialogue, as we always prefer, we're going to be introducing in just a moment the author of a brand new book, Forged in Chaos, A Warrior's Origin Story. A brand new book from Simon & Schuster, one that I've read from cover to cover, because our special guest, as we never say retired, but we always say a proud member of Delta Force. And if you're not familiar with Delta Force, you're going to get an education. This individual, of course, has so much to say when it comes to helping others because he went through a lot of trauma. A brief introduction. Tyler Gray is a leading advocate for veterans and mental health, specializing in PTSD and traumatic brain injury. He developed the LTSD theory, which explains chaos addiction and the neurological rewiring that occurs over time. Helping veterans better understand their struggles, a former Tier 1 operator, Tyler's military career ended abruptly when he was seriously wounded during a nighttime raid in Sadr City, Iraq, leading to a grueling 4-year recovery. After being medically retired, he struggled with the loss of identity and purpose before rebuilding himself through storytelling. His acclaimed documentary, That Which I Love Destroys Me, won a 2015 Voice Acts Award and became a key resource for military mental health professionals. Now an author, a speaker, and a filmmaker, Tyler works to bridge the gap between military and civilian experiences, challenging outdated mental health paradigms and empowering others to transform trauma into growth. It's a privilege and honor to welcome Tyler. Welcome to the show this morning. Thanks for staying up with us.
Thanks for so much for having me, Doctor.
Oh, I appreciate your time, my friend. This is interesting. You know, it's interesting. Many people may wonder, we normally talk science and technology here, but I think this is such an apropos topic. And I know on the podcast that you do and other things that you're out there doing and have done for a long time. Talk to us about the significance of D-Day, because I know we've had many folks, and particularly on this particular radio station, 77 WABC, talking about the importance of remembering what happened way back when, 81 years ago, and thus we'll relate that to the pain and suffering that so many of those veterans endured.
Well, on D-Day, I was, well, not on D-Day, but 11 years ago today, I was lucky enough to be standing on the beach in Normandy, on Omaha Beach, and 70 years to the day. So I was there 11 years ago, and I was lucky enough to have, and I forget the number, but at least 30 Normandy Raiders were there on the beach that pretty much that whole day. And I got to talk to quite a few of them. And I've done quite a few trips around the world in my lifetime, and I've never done anything that just blew me away in a way that I expected to be blown away, and I was still blown away, if that makes sense.
Oh, it sure does.
But I'll tell you the one thing that I'll never forget. I was talking to one of the Raiders in particular, and he was sitting on the beach. He was in a wheelchair, and he was looking out at the ocean. And he said, "Do you know how many Higgins boats there were?" And I was like, "No, I had no idea." And I forget the exact number, but it was around, from what I remember, it was around 5,400. 5,400 Higgins boats.
That's amazing.
And when I was looking at his eyes, I could see him seeing them, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine.
And
that's so
it
sacred.
was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And those guys, I talked to them, like I said, for pretty much that whole day. And every single thing they told me, it was unbelievable. And their sacrifice and what they did, it was just, it's one thing to read it. It's another thing to talk to the people that did it. And I will never forget that day and forget what they did for as long as I live. It's absolutely incredible.
Well, when I first saw, like many people, Saving Private Ryan, Tom Sizemore was a favorite of mine as an actor. Maybe you've met him, but Tom Hanks, of course, leading in that particular movie. I'm sure most people have seen it. But, I was aghast. I mean, I'm sitting there. I was a veteran, too. I didn't do anything like we're about to talk about with you. And obviously many of the veterans out there, like yourself, that serve their country, and the men and women that do that all the time. I was just amazed. I mean, that movie kind of bothered me, just watching the blood and gore of what we're seeing in a movie. So it was pretty much way worse, I imagine, than even a movie like that could depict, I'm sure. Yeah,
it's pretty. I mean, that movie, again, the opening scene obviously is just unbelievable. And I actually worked with the sniper, Barry Pepper, who played the sniper on Saving Private Ryan, and he told me quite a bit. And actually, I'll tell you this. When I was there and he told me this, I told him I was going to Normandy. And he said for Saving Private Ryan, him, Tom Hanks, and Steven Spielberg got in the water and were floating in the water at exactly, I forget the exact landing time, 5:44. Yes. I forget exactly what it was, something like that. And he said we were in the water at exactly that moment, and I forget how many years it was when they went in, like 97. And he said, you should do that. And so I did. Mm-hmm. I was there, at that time, and I walked up to the beach and did kind of, obviously I was just walking it, but it's one thing to being there is just something that is quite honestly impossible to explain. And I absolutely recommend anyone taking a trip over there because it's many years later, but it's not that different. The terrain is still pretty much the same as it was back then, as hard as that is to imagine.
And those German embankments, I guess, the fortified concrete is still there, right? Everything. They're all
still there in pretty decent, the World War II bunkers were actually the first time reinforced steel was used in combination with concrete, and that's why those bunkers were so difficult. It's a very long historical story, but and so they're still there. Even ones that were hit by what's it called, naval artillery, by battleships are still there. So it's pretty impressive. And when you sit there and you look at the bunkers and you walk in them and you look out at the beach, again, you just get a much, much deeper appreciation for the level of heroism and sacrifice that the Raiders did on D-Day.
Well said, Tyler. If you're just joining us here on the Dr. Sky Experience, we're privileged and honored to have Tyler Gray, and he's the author of a brand new book. It's Forged in Chaos, a Warrior's Origin Story. We'll be getting into the things and the details of the book, but this is interesting, Tyler. I mean, when people read this book, what I like about it, you describe yourself right in the opening of this book, the intro, that you are no hero. And that's interesting because we haven't even gotten into your background as far as the details. And I'm always so impressed when I hear people at that higher level of our military service. And, you know, ladies and gentlemen, there's room for you in this particular conversation as we get moving here, as we grind on through time and space. The contact number, 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. But to set the stage, this is something I want to know about. I mean, I've read so much about Delta Force. I mean, I never say retired. I mean, you are that, and I seriously mean that. I spent a short time in the military, didn't do anything like this, was more on the side of the lab medical world. But talk about the history of Delta Force, because I'm sure many people out there are probably going to go, wow, you got a real Delta Force Tier 1 operator on the phone? Well, yes, we do. But tell us the origin of Delta Force. That's a fascinating story.
There's a great book written by the person who started it, Charlie Beckwith. But the creation of the unit and actually there's the sister unit, for lack of a better term, really comes down to the just splurge, for lack of a better term, of terrorism in the 70s. Sure. I mean, you had quite a few, very well-known, terrorists. You had Munich, you had the Lufthansa flight, you had all these different, terrorist bombings and hostage taking and all these different things. And essentially what happened was and I'm obviously truncating a lot of it, but there was a general in the American military that saw that there was not a unit created, not a unit that existed in the American military that could handle specifically a hostage rescue or counterterrorism threat. And because the threat was so bad in the 70s, they essentially got approval to create a unit to handle that threat. And one thing I'll say about all U.S. Or really any special operations military units across the world, when you think of the term special operations, which means those units, every single one of them was created specifically for a specific special mission.
Absolutely.
And it's a mission that falls outside of, conventional forces' ability to do that mission. And so the unit was created specifically for counterterrorism and hostage rescue. And it started in the late 70s, and it is really, since its creation, taken part in every major operation that the U.S. has been a part of, whether a war or a skirmish, and quite frankly, quite a few missions and operations that are, still haven't been written today. But it's a very storied unit, and I was very lucky to have been a part of it for the time that I was.
Well, it's an honor to listen to you, sir, and I'm sure the listeners out there who have maybe little or no experience, and maybe many military veterans do. But the process, I mean, just describe it. I mean, there's lots of things you cannot tell us, I'm sure, that are, involved in government, and, you can't talk about some of the things that you do. But the process to become a member of Delta Force, just give us like a quick synopsis, because I don't want to steer too far away from the reason we have you here, and it's a good reason, is to talk about your experiences and how you're looking to help people through the experience and trauma that you experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I started, it's one thing about being in, the higher, hostage rescue or a counterterrorism unit is it's not a place you can start. They only take people that are, have been in the military for a certain decent amount of time, who have a certain level of experience, who are a certain age. It's not somewhere you can go right, what we would say, quote, off the street. So yes. For me, my off the street unit was, I was a Ranger, 2nd Ranger Battalion. I spent some time there. Then I became a sniper. So I became sniper team leader, sniper section leader, deployed to Afghanistan as a Ranger, got to work with the unit that I would eventually go to. And after I worked with the unit, there was no other place that I wanted to go to. And the process, it's pretty it's pretty difficult. You have to, first of all, apply to try and try out. I know that makes sense. It's basically a pre-screening process. You have to request permission to go, to get approval to go, and that's a lot of paperwork, approvals, and so on and so forth. And then if you get that approval, you go to a selection course, which is probably not what most people would expect for that kind of job. I know I didn't, and most people look at what that course is, and it seems contrary to what the job is. And what
and you've heard this expression. Yeah, you've heard this expression, Tyler. Some of my Ranger buddies, and many of them, they just look at me and they go, "Hey, Steve, remember, Rangers lead the way." You've heard that a million times, right? There you go.
You know, we should mention this. You just mentioned Rangers lead the way, and we should mention where it came from. So Rangers lead the way actually came on D-Day, 81 years ago today, and it came from the Rangers were on the beach, and the general at the time, I forget his name, turned to the 2nd Ranger Battalion or 2nd Ranger Company commander and said, "Rangers lead the way off this beach." Off this beach is the other part of Rangers lead the way on D-Day. Wow. So that's a great day to say that term today. So
see, we learned something, ladies and gentlemen, from our great guests. You know, I know so many, and obviously you're a part of this in your bloodstream and your DNA, but it's like all these different individuals I talk about, highly competitive. We'll get into later. I mean, I don't want to do the whole interview just on what it is to become a Ranger or to get into Delta Force, but it's so interesting. The actual patches I'm looking at here, the arrowhead, and emblazoned internally to that. Talk a little bit about the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife, which is the symbolic part of the British SAS, the Special Air Service.
Yes, that's correct. So the creation of that unit was actually formed off of the SAS was the prototype, for lack of a better term. It was the first, special operations unit that was doing those type of jobs. In 1980, they did Operation Nimrod, which was the takedown of the Iranian embassy in London and rescue the hostages there. It's a very famous operation. But so the Fairbairn Sykes dagger, which was very famous with the SAS, that kind of symbolizes the creation, using the SAS. And a lot of the SAS's selection processes and training process were taken, scrutinized, and I don't want to use the word copied, but to some degree copied and changed a bit. So it's a very similar process, for lack of a better term. And so there's a very rich history with the SAS because of those similarities.
Our special guest, ladies and gentlemen, you're just joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience. Very interesting individual here. Lots of questions we'll be posing to him, and you also have the opportunity. It is Tyler Gray, the author of a brand new Simon & Schuster book. That is Forged in Chaos, a warrior's origin story, as he describes himself in the beginning of the book. And I appreciate hearing this, that you're no hero, because so many people we've talked to in the world of the military, obviously they deserve the decorations that they get, but that's not what this is about today, ladies and gentlemen. It's about a deeper story, which you'll find, I think, very fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about this before we go to the break in just a little bit. But I just want to remind everybody, 1-800-848-9222. Your questions, of course, are much appreciated here. And I do appreciate everybody who has called this particular radio archive in the past. Tyler, let's talk about the whole purpose why we have you in the detailed sense. You're over in Iraq. This is a long time ago, and hopefully I got my dates right. Are you talking about an incident that changed your life in, 2005, if I'm correct on the timeline?
Correct, yes.
Please tell us what happened to you. I mean, this is the tough one for anybody to have to talk about, but God bless, my friend. Let me hear the story so the listeners can understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I'll start by saying it's interesting because, and this will make more sense later, but most people assume it's hard to talk about, but it really, honestly, for me, isn't. It doesn't really, even though it seems like it should, and this is one of the things I learned later about different struggles. But for me, it was a mission that I'd done, or a type of mission I'd done a million times. It was a nighttime assault in Sadr City, which was a pretty bad neighborhood out, in Baghdad.
Yeah, to say the least, right? Terrible.
Yeah, it's not a good place, and it's not nice, and it's just, it's rough. And we were doing a nighttime assault, and basically we hit a house that I just went in there, and I just very quickly, you do enough of it and you figure out when you go in, you just get a sense. I'm sure cops figure this out, but you just get a sense of when you go in, you can just kind of feel if it's a bunch of bad guys or if it's not, Mm-hmm. And I went in there and I didn't get that feeling. It was a family, and I just was like, I don't think we're in the I don't think we're in the right place. Next thing I know, I was getting called outside, and for various reasons, it was like, hey, we think it's, for lack of a better term, next door. And so we started moving to the next door neighbor, and all of a sudden a team went around the front, and all of a sudden all hell broke loose. Multiple people were shot within, I don't know, less than 5 seconds. Massive amount of gunfire. And so me and the team that I was with ran. We happened to be facing the backside of the house. We ran, jumped a wall, went inside the back, and started, clearing through the house, ultimately culminating with, there was a gunfight in the house, back and forth, got, pretty heavy gunfire in the hallway. And at a certain point, we were just in the tactical situation where it's hard to explain without knowing the terrain, but it was just because of the terrain, we couldn't assault the place we needed to easily. It was very difficult. So they had the advantage. We were at a severe disadvantage. And we were essentially trying to figure out that tactical conundrum, for lack of a better term. And then next thing I know, an explosion happened. And the way I like to describe it is it just made me feel small. I just felt insignificant to the power of the blast. Mm-hmm. And it blew my night vision goggles off. So I was on the ground, looking up, looking down the hallway, and I was just confused. There's no other better way.
Right. Who wouldn't be? Oh my God.
I was just,
this is horrible.
I didn't see, why it happened. So I just, in my head, I was, what happened? I was confused. And probably within, 3 or 4 seconds, I knew something was pretty severely wrong with my right arm. And I, got up. Again, it's funny we talk about Saving Private Ryan, because for some reason my brain, it felt like my arm was gone. And it sounds strange to say that, but because it had killed certain nerves, it felt gone. And it's not a feeling I can explain, but that's the best way I can describe it. And so I, like Saving Private Ryan, I felt like it was on the ground. So I started feeling around with my left hand, and I didn't feel anything. It was dark. I couldn't see anything. And so I got up and walked out of the house, and there was a porch light in the back. I looked at my arm, and it was, it looked like somebody had taken a machete to a cow's, limb, and it just looked like meat. And so I looked at it and I'm like, well, that's gone. And next thing I thought was I got an arterial bleed, and I knew I was bleeding out and didn't have a lot of time. And the wall was there that I easily cleared on the way in. I wasn't getting over that. So I sat down and tried to fumble with a tourniquet. And luckily, my buddy got there in time to get a tourniquet on me, which obviously saved my life. And again, it was everything changed in a millisecond. That ended my career. It took obviously time to get there, but that obviously ended my career in that moment, and really ended who I was at that time, for lack of a better term.
Wow. That's painful to have to talk about, and who knows? I haven't experienced that, and anybody out there, I just want to remind everybody before we go to the hard break here, a very special guest and somebody that's important to me, because, ladies and gentlemen, this story is fascinating as we go about and talk about. He's willing to discuss some of the details of the trauma he went through. Tyler Gray, Delta Force, a Tier 1 operator. He's the author of a brand new Simon & Schuster book that I think everybody out there who has family members or anybody, police, nurses, doctors, anybody that suffers trauma, military, I think would want to hear about what this man went through. The author, as we have, Tyler Gray, Forged in Chaos, a warrior's origin story. Much more when we come back here as we go to the hard break at the bottom of the hour on the Dr. Sky Experience, where on Talk Radio 77, WABC. And if you're calling in, We'll certainly do our best when we return to get you on the air with your questions and comments.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now.
Hi there, this is Rosemarie. I was on the Dick Van Dyke Show and the Doris Day Show and Hollywood Squares and had a very nice career, and I decided to talk all about it on the Dr. Sky Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, 31 minutes after the hour. Flashbacks are not just memories. They are relived experiences by an unknown author. But the power of that statement is minuscule, ladies and gentlemen, by the real experiences of a guest like we have on this particular archive. As you're just joining us, we're going back and speaking with our very special guest, Tyler Gray. His new book, a Simon & Schuster book, Forged in Chaos, A Warrior's Origin Story. Tyler, thanks for being back with us, and I'd like to see if we go to the callers right now. I'm trying to see who we have. I think we have Rich in New Jersey on line one. Good morning, Rich. You're on with Tyler Gray. How are you this morning?
Yeah, hi, guys. It's a very disturbing piece of film I've seen over the years, maybe back since high school, of the black and white footage. There's four soldiers in single file on the beach, and you see the water and maybe the boat, the Higgins boat, and for a split second you see the last man fall to his knees dead. And I've been wondering, has anybody else seen this footage? Because I noticed it right away. And I'm always alone when I see it. I can't say, I know it comes on so fast. So it seems to be the censors didn't get enough chance to edit it. Like you see a lot of dead bodies, pictures of bodies of wounded people, dead soldiers, right. But you've never seen a person actually dying on film before they cut away. Has anybody seen that shot before? I see it all the time.
Tyler, you're the expert on this.
No, it's funny. I know exactly. I know exactly when you're talking about.
You do?
I actually. Yeah, no. I know exactly when you're talking about it. So there's a show on Netflix that just came out called, I think it's Greatest Events, I believe, of World War II, and it's in color, and it's on Netflix now. I just finished watching it maybe, I don't know, a week ago. And that clip, if you watch that, and I forget which, watch the D-Day episode, and you'll see that footage. And it's interesting, if I'm not mistaken, I believe there's actually three people in it, and you see the first two guys kind of running, and the third guy just drops, and I agree, I thought the same thing. He drops in a way that looks like he's been hit. I mean, we could be wrong, but that's, to me, like you, it looks like it doesn't look like he's getting back up from that footage. But it kind of, every time I've seen it, it seems like it cuts out right after he drops.
Rich, you're very observant. I've never seen that. Yeah,
I've seen it for years, and it's disturbed me because that's a human being, a young kid, and he's gone forever, right in front of your face, you know?
Yep. It's interesting that we talk about this. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate your call, and we want to kind of get as many callers as we possibly can, 1-800-848-9222. But, Tyler, please continue with your story, because that's the focus of this particular interview, what happened to you there, and then subsequently the rest of the story that goes on in about 35 chapters here. This is interesting.
Yeah, so after that happened, it was the end of effectively the end of my military career. And I went through 4-ish years of just a lot of surgeries. I lost every type of tissue you can lose, from, nerve to artery to ligaments, tendons, bones, muscle, you name it, everything you can lose. And sure. The way they repair it or attempt to repair it is from the inside out, one thing at a time. And so it took many years. And by the time I was out, I was still doing surgeries, and I went into, for obvious reasons, and people also have to understand, I was in really, I mean, obviously because of the unit I was in, but I was in very, very, very good shape. I was working out twice a day. That lifestyle was, I was running, 5 miles, every day, and I get hurt and I cannot work out for about 5 years.
Oh,
and
wow. Yeah.
That really, really, what I didn't realize then, but I realized later, was I had no idea how much of my identity was tied up in what I could physically do.
Yeah, that's horrible.
I saw myself as a person that was physically capable and in great shape, and I looked a certain way, and the next thing you know, I'm looking in the mirror, and I feel like I'm disfigured, for lack of a better term. And it took me years to realize in hindsight that a lot of my identity was wrapped around my physicality, and losing that lost a huge piece of myself. And that created a massive, what I know to be in hindsight, clinical depression that was undiagnosed at the time. I also think it's worth mentioning to people, and other veterans have gone through this, but I had never taken a drug in my entire life. Now, I hadn't even smoked anything. The first drug I got was the morphine that was injected into me right after I got hurt. And I was on pain medications for obviously those, 5 years, a pretty ridiculously high dose for understandable reasons. Exactly. But I was not prepared to deal with that.
Well, you talk about the book. I mean, I'm getting a little personal here, and I'm sure you don't mind, because let me just mention this, and you do a better job of it. The book is unfiltered. I mean, as we're here on the radio, there's certain ways in speaking language that we certainly don't use. But your book is really, no, I'm serious. I give you a lot of credit. Your book is unfiltered the way it has to be, because it gets the message out. It's not politically correct to the sense that you're worried about talking about it. You just go right for it. But the amazing thing is, here we talk about you're in pain. And I had minor surgeries. I mean, many people out there, I'm sure. I'd like to hear from some of the veterans out there that may have had similar experiences, if they're willing to talk about it here in this particular archive on the Dr. Sky Experience. But again, with total respect, not to see who got hurt worse or what they did, but how did they overcome this? But I want to ask you this. This is interesting. In the book, what I get out of it is a lot, and I hope everybody else does by, going and get a copy of this or listening and continue to listen to this interview. But describe the term warrior. This is interesting. You go through a pretty detailed explanation of what a warrior is, and I'm fascinated to hear your way of saying it, other than me reading the words.
Yeah. So my definition of a warrior, and it's pretty simple. I feel that a warrior is someone that is, when pushed, will push back. Whatever the mechanism of pushing is, whether it's another individual, whether it's life, whatever is pushing on them, they will push back. To me, that's a warrior. And the reason I make that very clear in the book is because, yes, I was a veteran, but the book, as you know, is not specifically for veterans. It's for anyone that has been through any level of serious adversity or trauma in their life. And I want people to understand that just because they didn't wear a uniform or, have a job that has that title doesn't mean that they're not a warrior. Warrior is not defined by a job. It's defined by an attitude, and that attitude is someone who will fight for what they believe in.
Amen. I mean, I did this in basic training, and I served, this isn't all about me. I always say this way, it's about the great guest, not always about the host. But I served in the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office for about 22 years. It was a position called their, armed posse, but I'm just saying it's about organization, discipline. You're a team, and that's exactly what we're talking about here as you go into this particular part of the book here. The pain, I can only imagine. No, I can't really imagine, but it's just incredible. So here's an interesting part that I would like you to talk about as we move forward here. You're in all this pain. You're on these meds. And obviously what they're doing is you had to go through a hell of a lot of surgeries. And now I come to the point that I'd like you to explain, thank you for doing this, is that you're placed onto a C-141 and you have hours and hours to fly where? To Germany. And the rocking and motion of the plane is only exacerbating the pain. It just wouldn't go away, right?
Yeah, So again, movies, you know, talk about movies, and you watch a movie and you see somebody get hurt on the battlefield, right? They get, you know, whatever, blown up, shot, whatever. And then generally there's some, you know, they get moved, whatever. But the next thing you know, they're either in the hospital or they're back home. It cuts and they go from the battlefield somewhere else. What I didn't realize is when I got hurt, you know, I got a helicopter flown to the cache, so that was very lucky. But then as soon as I came out of surgery the next day, I had to get put on a helicopter to Balad. So it's like, think of traveling from Iraq to North Carolina. Just if you were traveling from Iraq to North Carolina, wow. Just normal. Now throw in that, you know, your arm is in pieces and you know, a massive open wound. And I'll tell you one of the saddest things, one of the saddest experiences I had in the military was that C-141 flight, which was the medevac bird from Balad to Germany. And I don't know, maybe it was 8-ish hours, but the entire plane was filled with, I don't know, 35-ish wounded soldiers and wounded Marines. And specifically, there was, I think, maybe 15 Marines that had a pretty serious IED go off. And there was one nurse, for lack of, I don't know specifically it was a nurse, but there was one person that was bouncing between all these different Marines. And I could hear them, and I felt so bad for it. I've never been more, like I said, sad, and it just felt like hell being in that tube with people that were just in absolute misery. And I was, it's like you're in another
universe. I mean, whatever that is, not like you say, purgatory or hell. But this is an interesting story. I know it may come to many people that we're saying these things that maybe they have no experience in. And the reason we're doing this, ladies and gentlemen, is in honor to those that serve our country. Obviously, the timing couldn't be better. As I know our special guest, Tyler Gray, would agree. We're talking about 80-some years ago, D-Day, and what happened to those individuals who did survive. And God bless those who perished, as we all know. But the interesting story continues here. And, you know, I don't know, Tyler, I appreciate your candor because, again, the book goes into an unfiltered version of this, which I think is a really interesting story. Well, we're almost up on that break here, but just before we go to it, I just wanted to say, so you again go over on this extremely long flight, and what? More surgeries, more pain, and then later as we get into the second hour, I want to talk about the reason, again, in detail while we have you here, talking about how you overcame the trauma. Because what's interesting here, you know, folks, the word chaos, this is an interesting thing. If you take a look at the word chaos itself, and I know you probably know this too, the Greek goddess Eris is the goddess of chaos. And what does it mean? Complete disorder and confusion. That's interesting because it sums it up, I think, really well. But Tyler, let's go to that break here, ladies and gentlemen. We see your calls coming in. Jan from Long Island, Gary from Arizona. And again, the number, if you're interested in chiming in, maybe you have a story too, as a military individual who, of course, has suffered trauma. We're here to talk about some solutions on a very interesting subject. 1-800-848-9222 is the contact number. We'll be right back after this important break.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, I'm Fred Hayes, Apollo 13 lunar module pilot. I'm just happy to do a little chatting about those exciting days back on the mission, now approaching some 50 years. And you're listening to the Dr. Sky Show.
There are wounds that never show on the body that are deeper and more hurtful than anything that bleeds. This particular quote, unknown as far as its origin. 48 minutes after the hour, we continue with our special guest, not only in Hour 1, but also in Hour 2, Tyler Gray, the author, Forged in Chaos, A Warrior's Origin Story. Let's go to the callers. We have a bunch of callers in the lineup here. Let's say good morning to Jan in Long Island. Jan, how are you this morning?
Hi. Oh, fine. How are you? I wanted to ask your guest if he had ever met Richard Marcinko.
No, actually, I'd never met him personally, but I did work with a guy named Chris Karachi. Chris Karachi was very good friends with Richard Marcinko. He was actually one of the what's called a plank owner in SEAL Team 6. He was one of the original members, which obviously, Marcinko created. And so, though I never met him, Chris told me quite a few stories of those days and of Marcinko himself. And it's, unfortunately, he passed early, so I never got to meet him in person. But I definitely got some great stories from Chris.
Well, Tyler and Jan, I just wanted to jump in. Jan, I knew Dick Marcinko very well, and he was on our programs that I did. Really? Absolutely. And I guess his nickname was the Shark Man of the Delta. And not to take away from Tyler, he was an interesting guy. He would go to the, the SHOT Show in Las Vegas when I was in the firearm world. And I met him many times, and what a great guy. And apparently, I guess, Tyler, you know this too. Apparently, he broke into one of the submarines that one of the admirals said is you could never break in and try to take over and commandeer a submarine. Well, what did Dick Marcinko do? He did just that. How about that? Isn't that amazing, Jim?
Yeah. Well, he was a commander, and he was quite. He didn't necessarily go by all of those rules.
Yeah,
so if you know anything about his what happened to him with the service, and then when they needed his services again, they put him back. They called him back, and they put his commander label back on him, and gave him other colorful jobs to do. I read all of his books.
He's a great guy.
Some of them he wrote with a co-writer towards the end of his writing so-called career, in addition to all the strenuous things he was doing. He died not that long ago.
Several years ago, but not that long.
Right. Tyler, you're right. And Jan, we wanted to have him on again, and you're right. I called him, and I don't know if this is true. He was telling me he was working with his mom who was, ill, and she wasn't well, so he lived with her and all the way to the end. What a soft-spoken guy with such a powerful background. But Jan, I really thank you for being part of our conversation here, and thank you so much for being on.
It's been fascinating. Oh, the training they go through.
Oh, it's incredible. Well,
Tyler's is unbelievable.
Well, Tyler's the living example of this, and we appreciate your call. Before the hour's out, let's say good morning to Gary in Arizona. Gary, you're on with Tyler Gray. How are you this morning?
I'm very good, thank you. Tyler, I'd like to thank you for your sacrifices, to our beloved country.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was lucky to be able to do it.
So I do have a question. Looking at your book too, looking to see the write-up on it. And you specialize. You've been advocating for veterans' mental health, specializing in PTSD, trauma, brain injury, TBI, and also there's a big section in LTSD 30, which explains chaos addiction, which a lot of these neurological rewiring, and basically a lot of veterans are suffering from that. So I think there's an example of it today, which is pretty recent, by the way, and current, which is very sad. I'm talking about chaos and the need for rewiring and PTSD is Travis Decker, a 32-year-old Washington State Airborne Army Airborne Ranger. And you heard about this, right? With his three daughters. So you heard about this, right? It's been in the news.
I actually literally just heard about. I literally just heard something about it maybe 2 hours ago, but I don't know the details. But it was mentioned, but I didn't understand truly the context. Can you explain it a little bit? Because somebody just mentioned it in passing, and I didn't know.
Sure, Gary, go ahead.
Divorced from his ex for multiple years, and he's got three daughters, 8, 9, 8, and 5. So they did a child exchange thing, but so he joined custody, right? So he had time with his daughters, so he took them out to an area a campsite where he hangs out with his pickup truck, and somewhere in the state of Washington. I don't remember the exact place. I don't have it in front of me, but he was recently signed up or agreed to PTSD treatment, but he didn't follow through with it, so he didn't do any of that. And there's also a belief that he went off his medication, whatever he was on,
Mm-hmm.
So the daughters, he basically murdered 3 of them out there. And he's still alive, by the way. They haven't caught him yet. They're looking the whole state of Washington, the FBI, U.S. Marshals, everybody's looking for the guy. He's got wilderness training, too, which is extensive. And it's good weather up there now in Washington, so he may be out there a while. But this guy was seeking help, I guess. I don't know whether anybody reached out for him in the military or not, or the Army. But, I mean, the problem is we got 22 suicides a day of veterans because nobody seems to be able to reach these people. I don't understand all that. Maybe you can help me with that.
Well, yeah, Gary, I thank you for the call. We're almost running out of time, but go ahead, Tyler. I mean, this is very important, and I didn't know about this story just until Gary mentioned it.
Yeah, I just heard something about it, not those details. But so the short answer that I can give in the time we have, Gary, is that, right now the awareness for certain issues, PTSD being one as an example, is at an all-time high. The treatments for things like that are at an all-time high, and yet the problem is still getting worse. And so logically, you have to look at that and go, if those awareness and treatment options are at an all-time high and the problem is getting worse, then maybe the problem that we've been told it isn't the whole story, or even possibly the whole problem. And so what my book is really about is that a lot of the things that we've been saying is the true problem are really just symptoms. And I think we've misdiagnosed the fundamental disease. And that's why these people are slipping through the cracks, is because the actual core disease is not being treated.
Oh, you say it so well. Gary, you get the last word as we race to the top of the hour. Go ahead. I don't think Gary's with us.
Oh, I think we lost him,
yeah. I think he's lost. Okay, no, this is interesting, Tyler. I mean, in hour number 2, I kind of segued this and tried to plan this way with your okay, obviously. We talked about it before.
Absolutely.
Learning more about you as an individual and thus the trauma that you've gone through, some of the experiences, and I won't, I'll be gentle, but I'll be honest. The book is unfiltered. It's got a hell of a lot of stuff in there.
You can be as honest as you want.
Hey, listen, brother. I mean, we just can't use the language, obviously, because of rules and regulations. But no, the thing I like about this is that you're the real deal. You had an injury, and I call it a much bigger thing than an injury. It's a traumatic experience. We know that. You lived it. But you're not just complaining about it, as they say, bitching and moaning about something. You're actually doing everything you can through trauma. And we'll get into some of that trauma in the next hour. But the good news, ladies and gentlemen, if you're still interested, and we have a number of callers on the line here, and we will get to you. We have Fred and many others that are looking to get in here. But the thing I find fascinating about all this is that you're also come and providing some type of a solution. Because, I go to the VA, they treat me good. I can't really complain. I know a lot of veterans say no, they get treated terribly. But that's not the point. The point is, in a quick summation in about a minute and a half, what are the issues right now facing the veterans in the care that they may not be getting here? Go into some detail about this with PTSD. I mean, it's horrible what Gary said, so many suicides a day. That's horrible.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the first thing I'll say about you just mentioned the VA. In my experience, the VA, each VA is very different. And so the experiences vary so greatly because each one is so different in how it's, operated and the people involved, et cetera. So some, are great and some are not so great, just like a hospital, I should say.
Sure.
But the thing that I found, actually, ironically, at the VA was I was told that, I had PTSD. I went in there. I was having issues. I knew I was having issues. I went in seeking help. I was told that I had PTSD. And I said, what is PTSD? I'd obviously heard the term, but I wanted to hear exactly what they said it was. And they told me. And it just didn't fit how I felt. And I told them that. And I said, I understand what you're saying, but you're telling me what it should be, and I'm telling you that it doesn't feel that way.
Exactly.
And so I left, and I basically vowed at that point, this is 2000, I believe, 8 or 9, and I just said I'm going to keep working on this, and I'm going to come up with my own answers, and I'm going to figure out a way. I'm going to figure out something that makes sense to me on what my problem is. And obviously it's taken quite a long time. It's taken, 15 or so years.
I don't know how I would handle it. I mean, each individual does. But, Tyler, as we hit this top of the hour, I just want to mention to everybody out there, you may have, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you do, family members that are going through this experience. You may have those that have passed on and obviously never got the treatment that they so deserve as being veterans of this country. And not just veterans. We're talking about police officers, nurses, anybody that's gone through trauma, a very sensitive subject this early in the morning or this late, no matter where you're listening to us. More with Tyler Gray, Forged in Chaos, a warrior's origin story. With you, me, Steve Cates, Dr. Sky, and the Dr. Sky Experience, here on Talk Radio 77, WABC.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
5 minutes after the hour, thank you for taking this journey with us through time and space. As we normally talk subject matter from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather, I thought in accordance with the 81st anniversary of D-Day, a very appropriate subject about what happened not only to those that gave their lives for the greatest country on earth, United States of America, but those that suffered trauma. In that particular time period, it was known as shell shock. Today, a big difference. PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and he's here to tell us, ladies and gentlemen, much more about his own personal trauma and his own chaos, the book entitled Forged in Chaos, a warrior's origin story. Who is he? It's Tyler Gray. I just want to remind everybody on our Saturday night expansion of the Dr. Sky Experience, which you can expect Saturday at midnight Eastern Daylight Time to 2 a.m. Sunday morning. We're going to go back with Captain Ron and talk about the greatest event. If you're interested in the world of ufology, the contact in the desert, lots to talk about there and update everybody. In hour number 2, space journalist Rod Pyle will join us on 2 very important topics. President Donald John Trump, of course, pulling the nomination for the next NASA administrator, Isaac Jacobson. And also, we'll talk a little bit more about the feud, whether it's imaginary or real, between the president and Elon Musk and what that means for SpaceX. But let's continue now. Thank you so much for joining us and staying with us, Tyler. Let's complete the callers that we have for now. 1-800-848-9222 is the contact number. Fred, if you're with us in Long Island, good morning. You're on with Tyler Gray.
How you doing, Dr. Sky? I'm honored to talk to you. The first time you call in. I always hold you on the Frank Morano show all the time.
Well, thank you for being with us.
I'll also ask you, the person I just heard through the grapevine, my friend of mine we used to work with, his name was Robert Inslee. He was in the 82nd Airborne, and I think he had a trauma with a plate supposedly in his head, and I believe he just passed away recently. I don't know if you heard of that person, Tyler, if you ever heard of his name. He was in the military. I know exactly where he actually was in Desert Storm again. He was in, I believe. I don't know if you can associate to that.
No. What did you say happened with his head? I'm sorry, I missed.
Yeah, please repeat.
I believe he told me, I guess, get injured, and they put like a steel plate. I guess they put that years ago when they get cracked the skull or something. They for operation wise. I don't know. I said I was told, unless it wasn't true or not. But either way, he just recently passed away. 62 years of age. It's pretty young. And he was actually in the VFW when it happened. It was crazy. I just heard it through a friend of mine who keeps in contact with his wife, and she told him. It was just a sad moment to hear that a few weeks ago. It just happened too, actually. So just just calling about that. Yeah, and also my uncle was obviously on the Pacific on the battleship. That's amazing. I had his plaque in the basement of the original picture. He was on the ships.
That's awesome.
That's incredible.
Yes.
That's incredible. Yes, my grandma gave it to me years ago. But the D-Day and all his war stuff is amazing. It's so important to recognize the past to the present time. People don't realize that. And I thank you for your service. I'm really honored to talk to you.
Well, Fred, I'm honored that you're with us. But Tyler, you get the last word with Fred.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. No, I didn't know him offhand, but there's just so many injuries and so many things that men and women are trying to recover from, and it's such a process, and we lose so many to different things, and it's just really difficult to try and continue to get everyone treated and the help they need. So I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you, Fred, for being with us, and we can memorialize all those that are in service or gave their life to this greatest country, and we do appreciate everybody. Thank you, Fred, for being with us. We hope you'll continue to stay with our radio show and join us in future iterations of this. Tyler, this is interesting to me. I mean, I want to go gentle, but hey, your book is unfiltered. Talk about some of the chaos that goes on in your life as much as you want to tell us, because a lot of people out there, hey, listen, we all make mistakes, and I'm not saying you're making a mistake. I'm just saying, hey, I've made tons of them, and it's all how you respond to this. But go on to describe. You're in this kind of a traumatic world in chaos. Describe some of the things that went on in your life, if you don't mind sharing those.
Yeah, so I kind of left off where I was saying that I was in a depression. I was on a ton of medications and all those different things. And again, I left the VA, and they said that I had PTSD, and I felt like there was more to it. And kind of the conclusion I came to, I was making a lot of mistakes. Again, as I said, I was clinically depressed. I was at a certain point, I wasn't taking the medications for physical pain. I started taking it to, alleviate mental pain. And really, if you think about it, that's really how you would describe addiction.
Yeah.
You're taking it to numb the mental pain, not the physical pain or other symptoms. And I did, again, for years and years and years. And I just, quite frankly, I didn't know who I was at that point. I was completely lost. And I started doing, for lack of a better term, acting out. I got into, drugs and alcohol. I was dating, in relationships that were very chaotic and very toxic and very destructive. And I was doing exceedingly self-destructive things. And I did that for years and years and years. Almost everything I was doing was at some level self-destructive. And the sad part that I want to be very clear on is at the time, I justified my self-destruction as a mechanism of growth.
Oh, wow.
I think you don't grow when you're comfortable. You grow when you're uncomfortable. So I was creating chaos and creating destruction to see how far I could take myself down and if I could come back up again. And each time I did, I said, oh, wow, look at the growth that I learned from that destruction. Mm-hmm. And it took me years to figure out that was really, I was using the growth as an excuse. And I was really just, quite frankly, being self-destructive. But it's easy for me to talk about so many things now in hindsight. But at the time, I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. And it took me years to really put together the why I was doing what I was doing. And that's really what the book is about ultimately.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I hope you don't mind me reading this because it describes, and this goes to the other side of the equation. Now here's a man, testifying here on this powerful station and in other podcasts that you do about what happened to you. And here's these strong individuals with Delta Force. And I'm, again, just describe a Tier 1 operator as somebody else has described it. And it goes like this. Well, in the regular grunt units, these men are seen as Titan-like ghosts. They're spoken only in a whisper, like the veritable monster under the bed, a boogeyman of sorts. Only that monster is on your side this time, and the beast is after the worst of the worst. This Special Operations Unit is officially under the Department of the Army and acts in accordance with JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command. They are the best of the best. Tyler Gray was part of that unit, one of the most dangerous men in the world when his universe was rocked forever. Although they are ghosts to us, they still bleed, and Tyler did bleed the night in Sadr City. The dangers of Sadr City were well documented. Everyone knew it was one of the most dangerous spots in the world. Let me put it this way, as this article continues. We had a ceasefire agreement with a terrorist organization and never could take full operation and control over it. That's how dangerous it was. However, Special Operations Unit routinely went on raids in this space looking for top-tier bad guys. So that is, you're the warrior. You're the tip of the spear No pun intended, because that's on the side of the uniform, right? And now here's a man confessing by telling us the truth here, and it goes into what? More unfiltered examples, which I won't go into. I mean, out of respect for you, and let people read that. But this, you're not alone. They're not alone. There's people out there, all people who've been in, not just military, right, Tyler? We're talking about people females that are attacked and have trauma through rape, other experiences that people have, first responders, police, all this. We're one big family. And if you have question or comment, ladies and gentlemen, still time, 1-800-848-9222 to share your experiences in a dialogue. Because I always say this way, Tyler, it's nice to have a dialogue. We're trying to have a, conversation as opposed to a debate or a diatribe. And carry on. I mean, this is interesting. So you go through all this trauma, but I won't go into the horrible details, but you came back out of this, but it wasn't easy, right? None of this is easy. This is hard work. You have to, reprogram your thought patterns, and you aren't getting the help from generally, as we say, the VA talking with you as if everybody has this PTSD. No other alterations are out there. You just have to follow what they say. That's not the way it works.
Yeah, correct. I mean, and I didn't mention, but the solution the VA gave me at the time, and I can't remember the exact number, it was between 8 and 12 prescription medications. I took them as prescribed, and as prescribed, I could not function as a human being. I was like a zombie, literally drooling on the couch. I couldn't function. I think I took them for 3 days. And then I just said, this is ridiculous. I threw them in the trash, and I quite frankly never went back to the VA.
Right.
And, you talk about the trauma. And the thing that I want people to understand, which is very important, is the trauma now, the way I look at any trauma, adversity, whatever you want to call it, chaos, I truly, truly, truly see it as a gift. I see it as the best thing that ever happened to me, because that is what has allowed me to understand myself and grow and rise above what it is. And if you think about everything, it's a crazy thing, but we don't realize, if you look back on the worst thing that ever happened to you at the time, and you probably look back now,
yes,
many of those can be the best thing that ever happened to you, because they were things that forced you to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And the key point about the book is, yes, it's not fun. The trauma's difficult, and it's hard, and it's a process, and it's back and forth in learning. But ultimately, I look at the trauma as a gift, because it's what allowed me to become a better person, stronger, better. And the contrast between the worst time you've ever been in and the best time, the good times become better times because of difficult times. You appreciate a weekend more when you work during the week. And for me, the process of doing all these mistakes and going through all these experiences, it's really what taught me. I ultimately look at my story and all the stuff I went through as a gift that has allowed me, or will allow me, to help others. And now I realize that all the trauma was actually giving me my purpose.
Well, like you say in the book, and I want people, of course, to go get a copy of this, or wherever good books are sold. Of course, their choice, and I'm sure they'll be listening and they're interested. But you describe the symptoms. Once you see the symptoms, then you search for the disease. That's the way, and I would think the other way around, but no, it's the way you describe it. So that's very apropos. What are the symptoms? What's happening to you? What's all this chaos? What are some of the leading things that you're noticing in your body? And then you have to search for the disease. And without saying you cured it, but for yourself, would you say that? I mean, at this point, you sound incredible, but this was a long path.
Yeah, it was a very long path. And the biggest thing that I learned is, again, I'm being told, PTSD. I was diagnosed by the VA with TBI. I mean, obviously I got blown up. That's not exactly shocking. And when you say PTSD, that D is disorder, and disorder means something that you're going to have to live with forever. Right. That's kind of the connotation. But the reality is, it simply isn't true. And when I went through everything and I really started breaking everything down, I read 10 books on PTSD, I read on TBI, I read all these things. And the things that I figured out is, specifically when you're talking about veterans, first responders, or anyone that's overcome serious trauma, especially in childhood, it's not one problem. PTSD is one problem. And when you say that that one problem is the problem, then you don't look for other problems. And that is a problem because there are other problems. For me personally, and I think most veterans will agree with this, yes, you've got certain PTSD aspects, but you've also got a massive identity crisis. And a lot of veterans say, oh, I lost my identity when I got out of the military. And I disagree with that. I think that's a mistake.
Yes.
I don't think they lost their identity. I used to think that. And then I realized, you know what? I didn't lose my identity when I got out of the military. I never had one to begin with.
Wow, how honest is that? Wow, that's really honest.
And if you really think about it, if anyone said to you, hey, I lost my identity when I lost my job, if somebody said that, logically you'd have to go, well, you know what? I don't think you really had one, because if you did have a strong, authentic one, you wouldn't have became the job.
Yes. Wow.
So there's really no way you could have had an identity truly if the job gave you one. And the interesting other part of that is also what goes along with that is a loss of purpose. Most people say when they got out, they lost their purpose. Again, I don't think you lost your purpose. I think you never had one. I think you were searching for one, and the military said, hey, here's one. Law enforcement said, hey, here's one. Nursing, doctor said, here's one. And you went, oh, I'll take that one. And the key of all this, I spent so much time talking to other veterans, and I started to see a pattern. And the Forged in Chaos title of the book is really, the term Forged in Chaos is what I'm calling the pattern that I saw over and over and over again. And that is every single person that I talked to all had a chaotic childhood.
I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind sharing some of that. I mean, am I correct from what I'm reading that you grew up in Bakersfield, California, though at least I have that right, and then carry on from there, sir?
Yes, I grew up in Bakersfield, California, and, you know, my childhood was chaotic for several reasons, but probably primarily my dad was an alcoholic, a pretty severe alcoholic, and he was really never, you know, but yeah, I mean, you know, it is what it is, and he was working very hard as a mechanic, and he was never around. He was on a service truck, and so I didn't really grow up with a father, and when I did see my father, he was not exactly in the best mood. My brother was very difficult for reasons that aren't his fault, and so it caused a massive amount of conflict in my family. That was at the house. Outside of the house, so I would always leave the house. I was bullied. There was, you know, a lot of it was not the best neighborhood, and so what happened, that chaos. The key part of being forged in chaos is that you look at PTSD. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Correct.
What that assumes is that a person had a pre-traumatic stress environment. It assumes a pre-traumatic stress environment. And for people that are raised in chaos, we don't have that pre-traumatic stress environment. So what happens is the child is in a chaotic environment. The brain needs to survive, and so it rewires itself to be calm in chaos. And this is essentially LTSD theory. The brain rewires itself to be calm in chaos, and what that creates is a person who, when the environment is completely chaotic, their brain is calm. But conversely, when the environment is calm, the chaos now goes in their head. And the only way, because chaos is your homeostasis, the way you need to calm yourself is by creating chaos in the environment. What does that look like? It looks like drinking too much, drugs,
this is powerful.
Creating fights with your wife, you know, being unavailable for your children. Anything that causes that chaos and dysfunction is strangely soothing because that's the environment that your brain is used to. And that is essentially, LTSD stands for lack of traumatic stress disorder. And what I realized over time is I don't have post-traumatic stress disorder. I have lack of traumatic stress disorder. I need traumatic stress in the environment for me to feel a sense of calm in my mind. The interesting part about that is it is to a certain degree somewhat of a superpower, because you're able to operate. Running into a building when people are shooting is not normal. Running into a house that's on fire, that's not normal. But if you are forged in chaos, it does feel normal to you, because that is your brain's homeostasis and natural state. And so what that leads to is you have the ability to do that job, which is why we gravitate towards them. And though it does make you theoretically a superhero in the eyes of your ability to do that job, the sad side effect, the double-edged sword, is that it also can make you a villain in your own life, because you don't realize consciously that subconsciously you feel the need to create chaos, and you're unaware of that entire mechanism.
Tyler, you say it so well, and I'm just saying this way, again, not just kissing up here in an interview, that the things that are going on with, let's say, the Veterans Administration and other groups, I'm hoping that through this power of this book that you've written, that we find out that they're starting to look at, and hopefully they already have looked at the LTSD, the lack of traumatic stress disorder, as a solution, which we're going to get into in great detail, with your permission, of course, talking about so much more. And then we'll also have a few lighter moments here when we talk about later about your affiliation with Will Smith as a firearm trainer. I hope that when you were with him, but we'll save that one for your answer later, that he was involved in anger management, since one of the times he was at the Oscars, he didn't show. I don't know if I'd want that guy with a gun in his hand next to me, but that's another story. And then also, and share this with the audience. We've got just a couple of minutes before the big hard break. This is also interesting. You play a role in a television series as an active SEAL team member in what program? Talk about that. That's interesting.
It was a SEAL team on CBS and then Paramount Plus, which we finished filming this show last year, but we did 7 seasons, 4 on CBS, 3 on Paramount Plus, and we did 119 episodes, I believe. And so I got to tell military. I was also a writer, producer, and director on the show, and so I was able to tell universal military stories through a conduit of obviously one SEAL team. And we talked on that show, we brought up topics that have never been talked about on network TV, like PTSD and all these different things, and the dysfunction that job can create. And I'm very proud of the work we did on that show, being able to connect the military and show essentially what I would call a more accurate portrayal of that world.
That's amazing. And here's a man who's gone through trauma, ladies and gentlemen. So he's going to suit up. And with all the injuries that he's had, he's an active participant here. And also another fascinating one, we'll go into it more in the next half hour, but your involvement with Suicide Squad, the actual, the original or the second, or the remake?
No, correct. Yeah, correct. The original film, yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, that's, you were what, an advisor, or were you actually in the film? Forgive me for not knowing.
No, on that one, actually both. I was one of the advisors, and then I was also on screen for, quite, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, something like that. So it was a crazy experience that for me, just being, standing next to people like Will Smith and Margot Robbie and all those people, it's pretty wild. When they're in costume, it's hard to describe, when you're standing there in everyone's dressed as a superhero and you're standing there. It's pretty surreal.
Well, we're coming up to that hard break, Tyler. This is amazing. And so much to talk about here in so limited time. But folks, when we come back from this important break, we'll be talking more with Tyler Gray. But how do you, is there a podcast or something that you can give us before we go to that break? How do people get in touch with you on this? They'd like to follow you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. On Instagram, Tyler A. Gray, Gray with an E. Same thing. I have a YouTube channel, Tyler A. Gray, Gray with an E. And pretty much the book, Forged in Chaos, comes out on July 15th. It's currently on pre-order on Amazon. Mm-hmm. I'm just very excited to get this message out there. And I really, truly believe in my heart that it can help people. And I hope it will get spread so that it can hopefully give people some hope, because there are solutions out there. And if we just got to make everyone aware of them.
Well, Tyler, you're welcome here anytime, and hope you'll come back in the future. And I don't think I have to pull any part of your body, no pun intended here. God bless you. for being with us here. When we come back, ladies and gentlemen, the phone lines are lighting up as you would expect. We'll be going around the country in all different locations. We'll be hearing from Mark in Arizona, Bob from Yonkers, Karen from Brooklyn, and still, ladies and gentlemen, from you. 1-800-848-9222. More on the Dr. Sky Experience here on Talk Radio 77 WABC.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, my name is Eric von Däniken. I'm from Switzerland, and I'm the author of books like Chariots of the Gods and many others. I am proud to be in the Dr. Sky Show. Always watch the sky. The big mysteries and miracles are out there, and we always will be surprised. The Dr. Sky Show is the best one in this belonging in this country.
32 minutes after the hour, thank you for joining us as you move into your late evening or early morning, no matter where you're listening, to the powerful signal of Talk Radio 77 WABC. Our helmsman is Bill. He's navigating this powerful signal not only around the nation and the world, but I'm even confident out into the universe. Tyler Gray is with us. Well, once a Delta Force member, always a Delta Force member. His book, Forged in Chaos, A Warrior's Origin Story. Let's go to the callers as we have Tyler. You're lighting it up here. Let's say good morning to Mark in Arizona. How are you this morning, Mark?
Very well. And Tyler, you're a blessed individual, and I can see you're doing a lot of help to people. Thank you for what you do, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure.
We had the opportunity, my wife Kim and I, to travel to Normandy in 1994 for the 50th anniversary. And it was a great experience. We went to Pointe du Hoc and saw a bunch of Army Ranger guys. What a bunch of wild animals, man. Those guys are wild.
I like that.
Yeah. I wish... Go ahead, sorry.
I said they were all out of control, and they were in their 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I've stood on the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc, and I walked from Omaha Beach, to Pointe du Hoc, which is actually much further than I thought. It was about 10 miles. But it is an unbelievable climb, and they did it under German fire, that was pointing down at them. It's a truly unbelievably mission. I mean, there's so many amazing missions from D-Day in general, but the Rangers that took Pointe du Hoc is just an unbelievably, absolutely just spectacular feat.
Mark, I'd love to make that trip myself. You've experienced that, and that must be something you'll never forget. Obviously important.
One of the things I've never forgotten is we had the opportunity to belong to the Navy SEAL Museum in Fort Pierce, Florida, and I know there's a new one being built in San Diego. I'd recommend all people donate to those organizations. But my main call was, did you ever have a chance to meet and speak with Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin?
Yes, I'm trying to think of where I was at the time. But yes, I did have a brief. I actually had a brief conversation with several generals, kind of randomly. That General Mattis. I had this weird almost Forrest Gump run-in with different well-known generals, somewhat randomly. Yeah, unexplainable. But yeah, Boykin, I did remember talking to briefly. And there's, go ahead.
No, the reason I'm going to interrupt, but the reason I asked you is because he got his doctorate in the theology here at the Phoenix Seminary, so he moved on to some interesting things in his life. But my wife and I, we had a chance to meet Ryan Joe before he passed on. We sponsored him here in Arizona with a group of people. We had the opportunity to meet Mike Day, who passed away about 2 years ago. Did you know Day?
I knew people that were good friends with him. I didn't know him personally, but I knew several people that were good friends with him, and it's sad that he passed.
Yeah, he was shot 27 times in Fallujah and survived, if you can believe that.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a crazy story. I was actually in Fallujah in 2004 too, so I'm very aware of that story, and I mean I've been told it by friends of his that were there in his platoon and everything. So it's an amazing story.
Well, Mark, from my home state, I appreciate your time. We got to move forward here. The caller line here is very thick, as we would expect for a great guest like Tyler Gray. Thank you, Mark, for giving us a call. Let's say good morning to Karen in Brooklyn. Karen, good morning. You're on with Tyler Gray.
Oh, hi, good morning. I'm so glad I tuned into the Dr. Sky show, and in Fortune Chaos, I just want to thank you for being a warrior and never giving up, because you shed so much light on my problem as well. And I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure. There's a lot of people who want to serve that aren't able to for certain medical reasons, you name it, and I'm just lucky that I was able to serve in the capacity I did and do what I did, because not everyone is in that position. So I really consider myself lucky. Karen,
that's a beautiful tribute. God bless you, and I really appreciate it. Unless you have another comment that you'd like to make, I don't want to cut you short.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wow, it's amazing. Let's continue on here. Let's say good morning to Bob from Yonkers. Good morning, Bob. You're on with Tyler Gray.
Good morning, Sky. I want to take the time now to thank all the veterans in all the services. My father was in the U.S. Navy, the USS Quincy, a heavy destroyer. The stories you told me, it was unbelievable. From being at the D-Day invasion, to being at the second invasion, up goes to France of Cherbourg, I believe it is. And he told me stories how young sailors became men within seconds after witnessing the horrors from the kamikazes. Unbelievable what he told me. One particular attack, he said, a kamikaze plane was coming in close to the ship, and the Japanese pilot was laughing. About seconds later, he wasn't laughing anymore. The plane was blown out of the sky by the big guns on the ship. It was unbelievable, my father said. It was amazing how young men became men within seconds, he said. Unbelievable.
That's incredible testimony. That's amazing, Tyler. I mean, all these stories continue. And Bob, just so you know, we once had a gentleman, a survivor of the USS Indianapolis, and it wasn't just because of, the ship being shot at. It was hit by a submarine, we think. But all those sailors in the ocean, where many of them never survived because of the shark attacks. And I know, Tyler, you know probably a lot more about that. That's horrible.
Yeah, that's a very, very famous story. Very, very famous story. And it's, as I said, I just ended up watching a whole series on World War II over the last week. It's hard for me to comprehend, and I mean, even having been in two wars, the sheer logistics and the numbers of the planes in the air and the boats in the water. It's just, my mind can't comprehend the scale that war was. And it's as you said, the stories are, there's no equivalent, as far as I'm concerned, in modern day, to the things that those men went through. And it's hard to, the one thing I will say this, because I think it's important, is the one thing I always say now to the veteran community is you can't ever compare, because there is no comparison. So when somebody says, oh, I did this, but I didn't do what you did. And I go, hold on, were you in the military? Yeah. So you're a veteran? Yeah, me too. Because our similarities are way more important than our differences. And as soon as you're talking about specifics and specific wars, deployments, units, services, it doesn't matter. We're all ultimately the same, and we need to focus on our similarities, not our trivial differences of when and where. And so I always tell veterans, we've all done the same thing.
Well, Bob in Yonkers, I appreciate your tribute to our military. I don't know if you're still with us, but if you had a final
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for honoring all the veterans.
You bet, sir.
Same, my pleasure.
Hope you'll call again. No, this is interesting, and I got a subject matter here. Once we come back from this other break, the last of this particular hour, I was thinking about doing this, and I think you'd agree. Let's talk about some of the solutions that you've got here, and I think this is interesting, without giving everything out of the book, but this is such a serious topic. But here's one that I want to bring up in just a moment or two that we have time. Your comment here, and I believe it 100%, society, I'm not exactly quoting you, but kind of the words, society no longer views warriors as a necessary part of society. And I think, jumping into this whole DEI thing, maybe in some ways, I see it all over the place, maybe there'll be a change, but where is that warrior spirit out there? See, I teach firearm training. You know firearm training. And a lot of people listen to this go, what, Dr. Sky teaches firearm training? Well, there's a whole other side. But look, neither better nor worse. But the point is, you have to show your war face when you have to. And you have to stand or else you're a victim. Because I've always said this, look, this isn't my interview, it's your interview. But the definition of a victim is simply somebody with no options. Obviously, fight back legally and responsibly. But what's your take on this whole thing about society doesn't really look at warriors as a necessary part of society? What the heck's with that?
Yeah, I think it comes from, quite frankly, if you look back all through human history, warriors were revered in every culture, and the reason is because they needed to protect. You look at tribal societies, small cultures. Again, warriors were always viewed as necessary because the group needed protecting. And one of the problems, and don't get me wrong, our society is great that quote unquote survival is so easy nowadays. But one of the negative side effects that's come from that is that because surviving is so easy, society has come to the point where they no longer view warriors as necessary.
Yeah, that's
sad. Not only unnecessary, but almost negatively as, just negatively as not just unnecessary, but quite frankly, something that shouldn't exist. And, we say that so many people, that person's born to be a singer, that person's born to be an artist, whatever it is. Well, I can tell you, without a doubt, some people are born to be warriors, and it is something that, nature, God has put in us to become. And now that society views us as unnecessary, the contrast is it views us as necessary when we're useful to it, when we're in the military, when we're in law enforcement, when we're in federal law enforcement, all those things. But as soon as you're not in that job and you're out of that role, they suddenly want you to go back to being, or not go back, but they want you to suddenly be what they want you to be, which is not what you were, because if you were that, you would have never done that job to begin with. It's an unrealistic expectation of society right now.
And in simpler ways, I'm not saying this to anybody in a negative way, are we a sheep or are we a wolf? And obviously that whole story could be, carried on in other, paradigms and other training programs. You've been through them all. You understand this. So that's fascinating. Absolutely. Tyler, we'll come back after this short break, and we'll continue here talking about not only you, but, of course, the book and the contents, and maybe some solutions that you might have as you talk about LTSD as opposed to PTSD. More with our special guest, Tyler Gray, here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Where? On Talk Radio 77, WABC.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hello, I'm actor Gary Lockwood, the star of 2001: A Space Odyssey. You may recall I played the character of Frank Poole, the astronaut on the way to Jupiter. Anyway, I'm talking to you, and I'm about to be on the Dr. Sky Show.
48 minutes after the hour, we continue, and we go back to our traditional topics as we move on to about 24 hours from now or less, as we talk on Saturday morning, midnight to 2 a.m. Sunday morning Eastern Daylight Time, with equally important guests. Tyler Gray is here. Tyler, we appreciate it. And if you give us a synopsis of some of the ideas that might be able to, help people through the process of LTSD as opposed to PTSD.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that is very important to understand is that the LTSD essentially gives you the common chaos. Once you understand why you're doing what you're doing, it gives you some agency of choice. So for many, many years, I was self-destructive. I was doing all these things, but I didn't exactly know why. Once I understood the why behind everything, it allowed me, when I was going to do, create chaos and do something stupid, for lack of a better term, I would go, oh, I know what I'm doing now. I see the pattern of my actions because I understand where they're coming from and what is leading to them. The other part of that I didn't mention earlier is when you have a chaotic childhood, what that leads to is children are egocentric. They think they know the environment, a chaotic environment is bad. And so what they do is they actually feel that they're responsible for the environment because of being egocentric. And so they then go, okay, the environment's bad. I must be bad. And the environment must be bad because I'm bad. So what that leads to is a massive lack of self-worth. And that lack of self-worth is one of the biggest, in my opinion, undiagnosed or unknown veteran issues across the board. It was one of my biggest issues. Once you understand that you have a fundamental issue with self-worth, and one of the things, by the way, that comes from having a lack of self-worth is what I call hero syndrome, which is I don't have any internal self-worth. So the way I feel worthy is by doing good deeds. Mm-hmm. Yes. And by collecting external trophies, you actually create external value. And so, like me as a child, I mentioned this in the book, I used to have dreams where I died in the dream saving someone, which is a very, very strange thing for a strange dream for a child to have. But obviously I had that because that's how I saw myself attaining value. So back to the solutions, you have to start building that self-worth and recognizing your internal worth with nothing external. It doesn't matter what job you have, if you have money or not, nothing external matters. All that matters is you are worth it, no matter who you are. Intrinsically, we all are. And so learning to accept that is very critical. The other thing about
go ahead.
The last critical part, very, very important, this part is PTSD, LTSD, whatever you want to call it, what it is. And I mentioned LTSD earlier, and I talk about the rewiring in the brain that happens in childhood. Therefore, a critical part of that is, and PTSD, by the way, is the same way, PTSD is a nervous system issue, which is physical. And the problem that the current way of treating it is, the VA treats it as a mental issue. It's not. It's a physical issue. And so you have to treat either LTSD or PTSD, TBI for that matter, as a physical brain structural issue and not just something you can talk out in talk therapy.
Right, as you say in your book, a fragmented medical system that doesn't address psychophysiology. How about that? Right, that's right on.
Absolutely.
What's your website so we know? I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
We're coming up to the end here, and I hate to have the end, but how do people get in touch with you? This is important.
Yes, actually, I'm glad you mentioned the website. The website is Tyler A. Gray spelled with an E.com. I've got, some other podcasts and different things, and you can get more information on the book as well as the subjects in the book. And I'll be continually releasing YouTube videos going more in depth on the different subjects and topics to really continue to try and explain these different things to help people.
Tyler Gray, what an honor. I hope you'll do it again with us as we have, more information on how you're continuing to help people through your trauma, Forged in Chaos. Let's see if we can go to another caller before the top of the hour here. Let's say good morning to Joaquin in Pennsylvania, if you're with us. You're on with Tyler Gray.
Good morning. Good morning, gentlemen.
Yes,
morning. Tyler, I'm listening to you, and what you're saying is striking a chord. I really wish there was a way I can get in touch with you, because this whole thing about childhood and about bullying, it drove me to do things, okay? It's weird. I was an ASVAB genius. I scored, so high. Navy recruiters, in the Air Force, they wanted me for the top nuclear and their electronics things, but I wanted to be a tough guy, because I was smaller, physically inept, and I was always bullied. So I wanted to go airborne, Green Beret. I was inspired, of course, by John Wayne and Sergeant Barry Sadler.
Yes.
And so I wound up enlisting in the Marine Corps because my eyesight wouldn't let me pass through the other stuff. And combat support, I wanted to play with the guns and get tough, but I went deer hunting and somebody shot me and left me with lifelong disabilities. And 48 years later, now that bullet's actually taken its toll on me. But I really want to get to what you're talking about, because, that childhood stuff really drove me. And, I became a trick shooter because I copied everything in the Western movies, because I wanted to be able to face somebody down, with the gun, and be faster than everyone. And I wound up doing trick shooting shows where I could shoot two targets at the same time. I could shoot blindfolded. I could shoot two out of the air simultaneously, with two guns. And, so I was very good. I never thought I was until a friend of mine watched one of my videos and says, "Oh, you really got to try, get into doing that," which I never made a career out of it. Things just never worked out. But it drove me to learn how to throw tomahawks, knives, the whole 9 yards, to be deadly in every other way.
Well, Joaquin, we appreciate your time here. I hate to cut you short, but I want to give Tyler Gray the last word on this. But Joaquin, I appreciate your service and how we all try to blend together when we have suffered trauma and chaos in our lives. Joaquin, thanks for the call. You'll have to take the answer off air, obviously. But Tyler, you get the last word as we continue on.
Yeah, no, again, on go to Instagram to, you can message me there. But the critical part is, there's so many things that he said that are, you read the book, that are similar in my story. So again, it continues to show that this pattern, and Joaquin, if you read the book, you'll see so many similarities just in the, 30 seconds that you told your story. And it really is a pattern. And the good news about the pattern of the cause is that also means that the solutions provided in the book should also work for the same pattern. And that's my hope. And I hope people get that out of it.
Well, a really interesting one on a very lighter note, if you do want to answer this question. What kind of a shot was Will Smith?
He was a very good shooter, and I'll tell you, in my experience working with A-list actors, they pick up things. If you think of what they do, they mimic, and they learn to mimic things perfectly. So they're very aware of their body and their movements. So I would say, without exception, every A-list actor or actress, for that matter, that I've ever taught has picked up shooting shockingly quickly.
Interesting. But not to be on the depressing side, the Alex Baldwin situation, that was a whole nother story where, who knows, God bless, where they apparently had, live rounds instead of dummy rounds or blanks, and boy, that's another horrible subject. Not blaming anybody because I don't know all the facts, but obviously firearm safety is important, and you know that. You're an instructor, and we do appreciate your time here with us.
Yeah, no,
so again,
pleasure.
Tell us again, how do people get in touch with you? I don't think that was clear to maybe some others in the first hour.
Yeah, absolutely. On my website is Tyler A. Gray, Gray with an E.com. Instagram, Instagram / Tyler A. Gray. Same thing with my YouTube channel is Tyler A. Gray. And, the book is Forging Chaos, coming out July 15th. You can pre-order it now on Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Tyler Gray, it's a privilege and honor. Thank you for your service to our country and helping those veterans and other civilians that suffer trauma, and not just PTSD, but as you describe it, a whole other paradigm that we can talk about in the future, as you described, another alternative to helping people in these times of need. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
We'll stay in touch. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the top of the hour, 2 hours, as you know, here, and many people have thanked me And I appreciate the comments and the emails at drsky@wabcradio.com saying that it's almost literally impossible when you have a one guest in an hour when you have such a serious topic. So in the future, we will do our very best to carry that on, not always. And just remember, ladies and gentlemen, without people like Bill, who's our helmsman navigating this powerful signal of WABC to you, the nation and the world and the cosmos, we would be less than what we really are, a powerhouse in the broadcast industry. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in less than 24 hours with the Saturday night midnight Eastern Daylight Time to 2 a.m. Sunday as we return to some of our regular topics from astronomy, space, aviation, weather, and celebrity guests and technology. Have a great morning.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Plan on flying? It's time to upgrade to a Real ID. Because in order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a Real ID, or you'll need another acceptable form of identification. So don't wait. Find out how to get your Real ID at tsa.gov/Real ID. That's tsa.gov/Real ID. Or visit your local DMV. And then you'll be cleared for takeoff.